My wife packed her bags and said, "I'm leaving to start a new life with someone better." I didn't stop her. I just asked, "Did you ever video call him?" She laughed and walked out. 3 days later, she returned without her bags and whispered, "How long did you know?" Subscribe before you keep reading. You're going to want to know how this one ends. I'm 35. I've spent the last 11 years building a life I actually believed in. A house in the suburbs, a marriage I defended to anyone who questioned it, a version of stability I thought was earned. None of that mattered the night my wife stood in our bedroom doorway with 2 suitcases and told me, calmly, like she was reading a grocery list, that she was leaving to start a new life with someone better. The lighting in that room was warm. Too warm for what was happening. A single lamp on the nightstand, throwing long shadows across the carpet, and I remember thinking, absurdly, that the room looked like it belonged in a different conversation. A softer one. Not this. She said it twice, actually. The first time, quiet, like she was testing how it sounded out loud. The second time, louder, like she needed me to react. I didn't react the way she wanted. I asked her one question. Just one. "Did you ever video call him?" She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, an actual laugh, short and sharp, like I'd said something pathetic. She didn't answer. She picked up her bags and walked out the front door, and I heard her car pull out of the driveway 2 minutes later, gravel crunching under the tires in a way that felt personal. I want to be honest about what I felt standing in that doorway after she left. It wasn't sadness. Not yet. It was something colder. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. It had gone quiet, the way it does right before you do something you've already decided on. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. By the time someone announces it out loud, they think it's the beginning of the story. Half the time, it's already the end of one you started weeks earlier without them knowing. Let me back up. 6 weeks before that night, I noticed she'd started sleeping with her phone under her pillow. Small thing. Easy to miss if you're not paying attention. I was paying attention. By the second week, her late nights at the gym had stopped matching her gym's actual closing time. I checked. Quietly. I didn't say anything. By the third week, I found a second charger in her car, a brand we didn't own, for a phone we didn't have. I put it back exactly where I found it. "You've been distant," she said to me around that time, out of nowhere, over dinner. "Is everything okay with you?" I remember almost laughing. She was accusing me of distance while hiding a charger for a phone that wasn't mine in her glove box. But I just said, "Work's been a lot. Sorry." And she nodded, satisfied, because that answer fit the story she needed me to be living in. The distracted husband, too tired to notice anything. After a week of silence on my end, I did something I'm not proud of, but I also don't regret. I set up a shared cloud backup on her laptop under the guise of freeing up storage space, which meant every photo, every video. And this is the part that mattered. Every video call log from certain apps started syncing quietly to an account only I had access to. The moment I opened that file 3 days later, I understood exactly who someone better was. It was her ex. Not a stranger, not a coworker. The same ex she'd told me, years ago, she barely thought about anymore. There were video calls going back for months. Not messages. Video calls, time-stamped, some of them over an hour long, most of them late at night, right around the time she told me she was winding down and going to sleep early. I watched the metadata for a long time before I did anything else. Dates, durations, patterns, Tuesdays and Thursdays, almost every week, starting around 11 p.m. I built a calendar out of it, cross-referenced against her supposed gym nights and her girls' nights, and it lined up with terrifying precision. This wasn't recent. This wasn't a mistake. This was a second relationship she'd been running in parallel to ours for months, timed around my work schedule like she'd studied it. I confronted her about none of it. Not one word. I kept going to work. I kept coming home. I kept asking about her day, and she kept lying to my face with a comfort that told me she'd done this so many times it no longer registered as lying to her anymore. "You've been really calm lately," she said to me one night, almost suspicious of my calmness, which I found darkly funny in hindsight. "It's kind of weird." "I'm just tired," I said. "Work stress." "You sure that's all it is?" "What else would it be?" She didn't answer that. She just looked at me a beat too long, like she was checking my face for cracks, and then went back to her phone. "Here's a question for you, and I want you to actually think about it before you scroll further. If you found 4 months of hidden video calls with someone's ex, Would you confront them the second you found out, or would you wait, watch, and gather everything first, the way I did? Tell me honestly in the comments, because what I did next divides people every time I tell this story. I didn't wait much longer after that. Once I had the full picture, the calls, the dates, a handful of screenshots from messages that made the nature of the relationship painfully clear, I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to break anything. I was going to let her walk into her own ending with her eyes closed, and I was going to be the one holding the light when they opened. So when she stood in that bedroom doorway with 2 suitcases and announced she was leaving for someone better, I already knew who better was. I already had 4 months of video call logs. I already had messages where she'd called our marriage something I'm just waiting to be done with. I didn't need to stop her. Stopping her would have meant fighting for something I'd already quietly buried weeks earlier. So I asked my one question, did you ever video call him? And let her laugh her way out the door, because I knew something she didn't. I had already sent everything I found to one person who mattered more than anyone else in her plan. Her ex's fiancé. I want to slow down here, because this is the part people always ask about. Her ex wasn't single. He'd been engaged for 8 months, to a woman my wife had actually met once at a work event, a woman who had no idea her fiancé was spending Tuesday and Thursday nights on video calls with a married woman in the suburbs. I didn't send an angry message. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I sent a single email with the timestamps, the durations, and 2 screenshots that removed all ambiguity, with one line. I think you deserve to know what's been happening on his end for the last 4 months. I'm sorry you're finding out this way. That was 2 days before my wife packed her bags and left. Which means when she walked out that door, laughing, thinking she was walking toward a new life with someone better, she had no idea that someone better's entire actual life was collapsing in real time, 40 minutes away, because his fiancée had already confronted him with a printed copy of everything I'd sent. I found out later, because of course I did. Small suburbs make sure everyone finds out everything eventually. That when my wife showed up at his place that same night with her suitcases, expecting to be welcomed into the new life she'd been promised, she walked into the middle of the worst fight of his relationship. His fiancée was still there, still packing her own things. Actually, mid-scream, mid-collapse, and my wife walked in holding 2 suitcases like she was arriving at a hotel that had just been condemned. She didn't stay. Obviously. There's no version of that story where she gets welcomed in as the replacement while the fiancé is still standing in the living room, holding printed evidence of the affair. My wife turned around and left almost immediately, and from what I understand, he didn't even walk her out. 3 days later, 3 days of complete silence from her, no calls, no texts, nothing. She came back to our house. Not with her bags. Without them. She stood in the same doorway she'd stood in 3 days earlier, except this time there was no suitcase, no laugh, no performance. Just her, quiet. Her makeup slightly smudged in a way that told me she'd been crying at some point and had tried to fix it in a car mirror before walking in. She looked at me for a long moment before she said anything. "How long did you know?" she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit there, because I wanted her to feel exactly what I'd felt standing in that same spot 3 days earlier, the specific discomfort of not knowing what the other person already knows. "Long enough," I finally said. "You knew about the calls." "I knew about all of it. The Tuesdays, the Thursdays, the 11 o'clock gym nights, all of it. And you didn't say anything? Would you have stopped if I had?" She didn't answer that one either, which was, in itself, an answer. "Did you?" she started, then stopped, then started again, her voice cracking slightly in the middle of the sentence in a way I'd never heard from her before. "Did you tell her?" "His fiancée. Did you? Was that you?" I told her the truth, I said. What she did with it wasn't my decision. She sat down on the edge of the bed, the same bed she'd stood beside 3 days earlier with her bags packed, and put her face in her hands. And for the first time in 11 years of marriage, I watched her cry without performing it for anyone. There was no audience this time. No friends at a dinner table. No one to gasp or reach for her hand. Just her, unraveling quietly in a room with warm lighting that no longer felt warm to either of us. If you're still with me, tell me in the comments what you would have done differently. Would you have let her back in the house at all, or shut the door the moment she showed up without her bags? I didn't shut the door, but I also didn't let her back in the way she wanted. I told her she could stay in the guest room while we figured out logistics, and logistics, as it turned out, meant divorce paperwork that I'd actually already started drafting during those 6 weeks of silent research. Because by the time someone tells you they're leaving for someone better, the marriage is already something you're managing, not saving. She tried, over the next few weeks, to explain herself in a dozen different ways. It started slow. It wasn't supposed to happen. He made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Somewhere in there she even tried, "You were never around," which might have landed better if I hadn't spent 6 weeks tracking a Tuesday through Thursday pattern that existed specifically because I was around, at that exact time, every single week, and she knew it. "You humiliated me," she said once, near the end of it. Sending that email. "You didn't have to do that. You humiliated yourself the moment you decided 4 months of secrecy was worth less than the marriage you were lying inside of," I said. "I just made sure the people affected by it got to make informed decisions. That's not humiliation. That's honesty. Something you clearly weren't familiar with." The divorce was finalized 4 months later. She got the car. I kept the house. Her ex's engagement did not survive the week his fiancée found out, and last I heard, through the same suburban grapevine that told me everything else, my wife and her ex haven't spoken since the night she showed up at his door, holding suitcases nobody wanted her to bring inside. As for me, I still live in that house. I changed the lighting in the bedroom. Actually, small detail, but it mattered to me. Different lamp, different shadows. I didn't want that warm light reminding me of the last conversation we had in that doorway every time I walked past it. I don't regret the silence. I don't regret the 6 weeks of watching before I said a single word. I regret, sometimes, that I spent 11 years being the kind of husband who didn't check the charger in the glove box sooner. But I've learned something about myself since then. I'm not someone who explodes when I find out I've been lied to. I'm someone who waits, watches, and makes sure that when the truth finally surfaces, it surfaces exactly where it can't be denied, laughed off, or walked away from. Subscribe if you want the next one before anyone else sees it, and drop a comment below. Do you think I went too far by telling the fiancé, or did she deserve to know? Edit. A few people are asking how the cloud backup thing actually worked without her noticing. I set it up as a routine storage cleanup, which on most phones and laptops runs quietly in the background. I'm not going to walk through exact settings or apps, mainly because I don't want this turning into a how-to guide, but I'll say it wasn't anything illegal or invasive beyond what any shared device backup normally does. Edit. Some of you are asking if I felt guilty about contacting the fiancé directly instead of staying out of it. Honestly, no. I thought about it for 2 days before I sent anything. What tipped it for me was realizing that if the roles were reversed, I would have wanted someone to tell me the truth before I built a life around a lie. I still believe that. Edit. To the people saying this sounds too calculated for someone who was actually hurt, I'd just ask you to sit with this. I stood in a doorway and watched someone I built a life with walk out laughing at me. Calculated isn't the opposite of hurt. Sometimes it's just what hurt looks like when you refuse to let someone see it land.